this now, 1 in 66 jobs in South Africa is driven by beer. That's according to Oxford Economics. It released a report assessing the beer industry's economic footprint in the country and says it continues to, or rather contributes billions to the country's GDP. The chief executive, Richard Rivett-Carnick, says that it's the first time in over a decade that there's been such a comprehensive piece of research done into that industry and its contribution to the economy. Let's talk more about this. We've got SAB economist Fatsani Banda, who joins me in studio to talk more about these findings. Very interesting insights. And maybe let's start with, first of all, I must say, if I'd known it contributes this much to GDP, I probably would be drinking a lot more of it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah. So maybe just talk about why it was important to commission a report of this nature.
Thanks for having me, Rafia, and thanks for your viewers for watching. I think, first of all, this is an industry viewpoint or a piece of research that had begun pre-budget conversations. As you may remember, we had began the conversation during our State of the Beer Economy address, where the Oxford Economics had released a global report reflecting the beer industry's contribution. And we actually essentially narrowed this down and said, look, what is the South African contribution of the beer industry? And the importance of this report is that it shows our economic impact with coherent estimates of a robust analytical front on what exactly the economic footprint of the beer industry is. As you stated already, this has been a 10-year weighted research. It's been consolidated amongst the largest beer manufacturers, including SAB and Heineken itself. So it's really important to have the story and the narrative in which we carry that we have created over 248,000 jobs in our value chain for South Africa, and this being backed by a reputable economic research house such as Oxford Economic Research.
Let's talk about those numbers. The overall contribution to GDP, which is really important because that speaks to the tax revenue that the country really needs. So you've spoken about over 200,000 jobs being created within the industry alone. But when we talk about the actual money that's circulated within the economy because of this industry, what are we talking about here?
Well, added to the research that you just noted, the 1 in 66 jobs contributed by the industry in 2019 is huge, given our massive unemployment.
Yeah.
But concretely in GDP, that is 1 rand in every 79 rand of GDP, amounting to 71 billion rand contributed by the beer industry in 2019. And that's outside of tax revenues. So if we talk about tax, that amounts to 46 billion rand. And that is massive for an industry that's gone through a pandemic that's been very hard on us, constrained. But given our socio-economic footprint, we have a large story to tell about the multiplier effects, not only through jobs, but through our economic multiplier contribution that I think needs to be noted as well in this conversation.
No, absolutely. And it comes at a time when there is a raging conversation around the regulation of alcohol in the country, increasing the legal age of drinking, reducing operating hours. How do we create a balance with that conversation, but also recognizing the positive contribution that the industry is actually making?
As you rightly noted, it is a balancing act. And what we think we need to hear more of in this conversation is to include what essentially is an underrepresentation of our socio-economic impact in the conversation. Of course, regulation is part and parcel of having a growing and thriving economy, and we're not excluded from that conversation. All sectors are regulated, but we think in the way in which we contribute through this economic research, our economic multipliers, our investments, our pledge of 4.5 billion rand during the investment conference is a sign and a highlight of our big influence in creating the multipliers that this economy so desperately needs. So we do think the regulatory environment is important, and having us at the table of that conversation is part of that. But included in the balancing act should be a conversation about what exactly do our economic multipliers look like. And the Oxford Economics research puts that on the table and says, look, what is the conversation about regulation? Is it balanced and is it cognizant of our representation of our economic impact in South Africa?
And that economic impact, the socio-economic impact you referred to very briefly, speaks to the value chain as well. You know, it's kind of like a ripple effect that it has because it's the manufacturers, the distributors, the transporters. So it is a broad-based benefit to the entire economy, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I think one of the big highlights and championing points of our value chain is our downstream industries, which creates about 68,000 jobs. That's our taverners, our wholesalers, our liquor traders, or our sports venue, the amount we put into sports venue and those sort of hospitality events. And I mean, that is a big part of where you see entrepreneurship, SME development, which our government continues to champion as the growth point of job multipliers, which we think as an industry we contribute to. And I think we need to highlight those nuances when you speak about economic contribution, that we are at the heart of SME development, for instance, the heart of transformation, and that seems to be the key points of public policy change in the economic conversation in South Africa.
Yeah, I want to maybe go back a little bit to the conversation around regulation, because it also speaks to educating taverners, those who go to taverns, and I suppose the society at large about responsible drinking. And I just want to get a sense of SAB's role here. You know, we are talking about the economics and the contribution, but the conversation around responsible drinking and the education is also quite important.
SAB has always been at the forefront of regulatory frameworks and responsible trading, responsible drinking, and promoting responsible communities. And that's at the heart of our business. We don't have a business model outside of that. And I think within SAB internally, we have a balanced conversation about that. We like to represent the fact that we contribute to the livelihoods in this country, but at the same time, underlying at the underbelly of that is responsibility. And we are aligned with the liquor boards and the compliance duty they have to associate what we have as a principle as responsible trading and what they do as the regulatory face front of really ensuring that that compliance takes place. So we're fully aligned with that as a business, and we champion that within all our activities, including promoting responsible trading within our taverns. And that is not aside from the economic conversation we're having at the moment with our economic impact coming out from the Oxford Economics Research Report.
What trends are you all seeing within the beer industry now? I know we're talking about the fact that it's contributed quite significantly to economic growth, but moving forward, do you find that this kind of trend will continue? And I ask this question because people are a lot more conscious of their health and what they put into their bodies. So do you have conversations around the changing habits that people might gain that might have an impact on the industry, or not just yet?
Well, I mean, there's different conversations depending on who you are, right? So the pandemic created different socioeconomic dynamics. Some people responded in a more elastic way. They changed the way they saw drinking patterns, etc. And some consumers weren't. So it does vary on the consumer. And we do think we have taken a cognizance of that. But in general, we do promote moderation. We do promote our recent innovations, such as Castle-Free, to take into consideration consumers that have taken on a different approach to consuming alcohol. And we are cognizant of the fact that people do change over time, not regularly, but consumer patterns do indicate that structural changes, such as a pandemic, for instance, to encourage change amongst consumers, and we have adjusted our innovations to suit that.
Very interesting insights. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That is SAB economist Fatsani Banda talking to us about the economic contribution that beer has made in South Africa, creating over 200,000 jobs and, of course, contributing over 40 billion rand in tax revenue.